Welcome to In Depth for a closer look at what is making mining headlines in the Americas. Brazil's mining major Vale says it will spend $10 billion on operations in Canada. The announcement has been met with mixed reactions. Lizzo Hill, Mine Weekly deputy editor, joins me from Toronto, Canada, to talk about this issue. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Martin.
What investments has Vale announced?
Well, as you said, the company has come out with a big announcement, a big press release stating that it's planning $10 billion of investment in its Canadian operations over a span of 5 years. Vale's operations in Canada at the moment, it's got operations in Ontario, which is in Sudbury mainly, but also Port Colborne, in Manitoba, in Newfoundland and Labrador, as well as a potash project in Saskatchewan. So in Ontario, the company said that it's going to spend $3.5 billion on upgrades. Most of the Ontario operations, nickel mining and processing facilities are in Sudbury. The company, so as I said, the $3.4 billion on upgrading facilities. Some projects include the company's planning a big upgrade of its Clarabelle mill in the Sudbury Basin. It's also building a new mine, the Totten mine, also in the Sudbury region, which will in fact be the first new mine for the company in almost 40 years in the Sudbury region. And finally, just also in Sudbury, the company is looking at a significant emissions reduction project, looking across its operations to cut emissions from the mines and facilities there. Then looking at Newfoundland and Labrador, where Vale produces nickel from, or has a nickel operation, the Voisey's Bay mine. The company there is building a large processing facility in Long Harbour, which will process concentrates from the Voisey's Bay mine. And then the third province that Vale is working in, Manitoba, things are a little bit more cloudy there. Although the company has said that it's going to be spending big money to explore for new resources and to expand and extend its mines in Manitoba, Vale has also announced that it intends to end smelting and refining operations in Manitoba by 2015. The company says that it doesn't have the feed to keep those plants full, and it's also cited new emissions reductions regulations that will be coming into effect in 2015. And it says that these regulations mean that the plants, those operations, can't be viably operated. Of course, the decision's drawn a lot of criticism from provincial officials, from unions in Canada and in Manitoba. But Vale, at least for now, says that the decision is final, that they're going to stand by that. So that's Manitoba. And then just quickly in Saskatchewan, which was something we've heard a lot about lately, the company has a potash project, which it says could cost between $2.5 billion and $3 billion. The project's only in pre-feasibility stage at the moment, but the company really, in the release and talking to media over the last couple of weeks, the company expressed quite a lot of optimism or expectation that its board will approve that Saskatchewan potash project during 2012.
Is this all new money, or is this old investments dressed up to look fresh?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly a good portion of the investment is new announcements, new projects, but critics of the company, and there do seem to be one or two in Canada at the moment, have pointed out that some of it, certainly the Newfoundland and Labrador processing plants, for one, the Totten mine, things like that actually are not surprises. They have been either committed or announced by the company already. And then other things, for example, the emissions reduction project in Sudbury really is the company to an extent falling in line with government regulations, implementing the requirements of government. So certainly to an extent, critics do have a foot to stand on to say that, this big shiny $10 billion number maybe isn't all new investment announced.
And the announcement comes at quite an interesting time, given that Vale's big rival, BHP Billiton, has just dropped plans for a big investment of its own in Canada. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that's right. When Vale acquired these operations, when it bought another big Canadian miner, Inco, in 2006 for almost $20 billion. And in order to get that acquisition approved at the time, the company made a number of commitments to the Canadian government. That, in fact, was to get approval under the Investment Canada Act, which is what BHP Billiton has bumped up against in its now failed takeover attempt of Potash Corp. And so Vale made commitments on things like jobs, investment, but in fact, those commitments were never made public. They were just between the company and the government. That's actually something that the opposition parties and unions have been calling for, is for those things to be made public so that the public knows actually what the company committed to. But certainly Vale has had its share of bad press since the acquisition was completed. When the financial downturn hit late 2008, like other miners all over the world, the company took steps to curtail some production, to cut down on project spending, and laid off a number of workers. So this, of course, drew criticism and accusations that the company was reneging on its commitments to the Canadian government. Vale, for its part, actually said that it had hired hundreds of workers in the interim since the acquisition was closed, since it bought Inco, and so that it was not going back on promises, that it was still well ahead of the commitments that it had made to the government. But it certainly didn't help the company's reputation. And then secondly, just in mid-2009, workers, first of all in Sudbury, at its Sudbury operations, mining and milling workers, and then about a month later at Voisey's Bay, the mine in Newfoundland and Labrador, went on strike over contract negotiations. And really after a bitter, acrimonious year-long strike, the Sudbury workers finally went back to work and agreed on a contract in July this year. And in fact, the Voisey's Bay workers are still, have yet to come to an agreement and are still on strike. So, and during that period, there really was, accusations flying and criticism of this foreign entity that had come in and taken over these historic Canadian mining operations. And then just during the Potash and BHP Billiton debate, certainly Vale was held up by critics or by people who were saying that the deal should be blocked by the Canadian government. Vale was held up as sort of an example of what could go wrong when a foreign entity comes up and buys Canadian mining operations. So certainly in the wake of the BHP Billiton and Potash Corp situation, Vale does seem to want to put forward its best face and show Canadians that it is here, that they say we are here to stay, we do want to invest in the country. So, and just one other interesting thing actually is the announcement that they intend to go forward, or they expect to go forward with this big potash project when the Canadian government announced that it would block the potash transaction, that it would block BHP Billiton's offer. There were a lot of dire predictions that the governments, the federal government and the provincial government was setting out a bad message about investment in Canada, investment in Saskatchewan, and that this would deter investors. So certainly Vale's announcement that it expects it could and it will spend some $2.5 billion to $3 billion on the mine. It is an interesting announcement and I think certainly welcome from officials in Canada.
Lizo, thank you so much for your time. That's the end of the show today. Join me again next week for more news and insight on mining in the Americas. I'm Martin Joaquin in Johannesburg.